wasn't. I think it was really good. It was a lot of fun hanging out and chatting last night. What do you mean you sounded 12? You weren't raging at people because you weren't winning the entire time. And Crimson mentioned this yesterday too. When you're not used to hearing your voice or listening to yourself all the time, you just think that you sound really weird. I mean, even when you have been listening to yourself for years and years, you still think that, oh gosh, I really like hit a wrong note there, or oh my gosh, my voice cracked there, or wow, I really sounded like a boy in that one. Like, you know, it's just how it goes. You just keep doing your thing, and people show up, and they don't notice because they're just there to be there and have fun and chat with you. No, I'm not hungover, I'm just tired. I was hoping that finishing this coffee and exercising was gonna get me pumped up, but who knows? Who knows? Yeah. I had to drink all that water though. I couldn't just go to sleep and then wake up with an actual hangover. That's a mistake I don't make anymore. But the only time that I really used to get like actual hangovers was when I would mix different alcohols. Like I would finish a bottle of vodka and then move on to rum, and then the next day would just be pain. Or I would finish a bottle of wine and move on, like a red wine, and move on to like a rose or a white. And then after that have some vodka. And it would just, the days after those were just rough. Drink you. Okay. Did the music just stop? No, it's still going. It's just a quiet ass fucking track for some reason. Cool. Okay. Imagine having vodka at 5 in the morning. Imagine going to sleep after drinking vodka the entire night and waking up and putting vodka into your coffee. That was the kind of alcoholic that I was. And then for lunch, oh, that got loud. For lunch, I would put vanilla vodka in Coke. I'd have those 20-ounce bottles of Coke and just add like 4 or 5 shots of vanilla vodka just so that you get like this vanilla flavored. Oh gosh, I was bad. I was really bad back then. How did I know? Because I'm Irish. And if there's one thing that Irish love is a good Irish coffee in the morning. Even though it's the wrong type of alcohol. Oh man, and the vodka, if I put it in too fast after the cream, some of the cream would curdle. Grass flavored vodka? You were mostly drunk? After the bottle was gone, the taste didn't matter. No wonder you don't like drinking. You had really bad... I mean, if you want to drink something that tastes like plants, you may as well just be drinking, like Jameson or something. What is that? Gin. Gin. And then the other one, they both taste just like pine needles. I don't understand why people like those. How's it going, modern man? We're just here just chatting. I haven't even started reading. I'm trying to avoid reading until I sort of wake up a tiny bit. I'm glad your consultation to get a new tattoo went well. Hope you're getting something super awesome. Oh man, I want some Chipotle. Talking about how... No, that's not how much I used to drink. Water Crypt, it may be how much you drink. I don't drink like that anymore. And I never will again. You get a hospital visit and the doctor says you need to stop. Then you actually do stop. As soon as you turn 18, you stop drinking? That's not good. Well, I mean, it's not good that you were drinking before you were 18. Gotta let your brain develop. I don't know, I feel like it doesn't matter. Things that put you in a different state of mind are gonna make your brain wonky long term anyways. Because I didn't start drinking until I was like 22. And then I was like a super drunk between like 23 and 25, 24. It was like a year and a half. It's like a solid like 18 months that I was a drunk. And and like a lot of that's like I think what started making my memory start sliding downhill, because I used to have a really sharp memory before I started drinking really hard back in the day. But I don't know. Grandma Swoon. I tell you, young whippersnapper, that if you have yourself some Kahlua in your coffee every morning, you're gonna feel right as rain when you go to work or to the gym. You know, it's not gonna make you drunk or really buzz. Some Kahlua is just gonna be perfect. Everything in moderation. Yeah, exactly, modern man. 2 beers a day. Yeah. Yeah, I'm the same way pretty much these days. Like, last night was the first time I'd had anything to drink in like 3 or 4 days. Okay, well I have my cocoa with Kahlua like every other day, but that's not like drinking. I only put like an ounce or two in my cocoa, so it's not like enough to even like get me buzzed. It's just for the flavor. Cause I still miss that rum flavor, but just thinking about drinking hard alcohol is just dangerous. Ruck marching? vodka, Red Bull, and Gatorade. Wow. Sure thing, Krim. One of my favorites towards the end of, and Gatorade. Wow. That's a good combo. One of my favorites before I stopped drinking hard alcohol was rum and just the classic Monster. Like, something about the aftertaste of rum changed the flavor of your classic, like, green Monster to be like this bubblegum flavor. It was super good. And I don't normally care for chasers either. Like, I just love me some rum. Ooh. Military hiking. Oh my gosh. Does the Camelback have like separate pouches or something, or is it just all mixed together, the vodka, Red Bull, and Gatorade together? Because I feel like the electrolytes in the Gatorade would nullify some of the alcohol in the vodka. Welcome back, Krim. Hydration liquid. Not with the amount of vodka you put in there, I see. No, water crip. Oh, I just clicked the, how do I undo that? No, I just clicked the timeout button. I didn't know there were different levels of timeout. No. How do you undo it? Slash untimeout? Oh yeah, that is a timeout. Crypt. What am I doing to water crypt? I'm remove timeout. Okay, yeah, perfect. I'm removing their awful comment. That was so gross. Ugh. Welcome back, Water Crypt. How was your time in the Shadow Realm? Oh, you're right. Oh no, it says that he's still modded. Yeah, it's just a visual glitch. It does that with like subscription badges and stuff sometimes. It was all pitch black, of course. Did you see Jimbo? Jimbo. Jimbo. Okay, should I attempt to read this again? I just feel that it's gonna go poorly. You saw Yugi's grandpa. Oh no, that's so sad. Oh no. Just skip reading today? No. No. I refuse. I refuse. Grr. Grr. Woof. I was sad for Yugi's grandpa. And I was mad that you're telling me what to do. I don't have to explain my facial expressions. Damn it. What do you mean, did you? I mean, I can... Oops, that's not the right button. I can click on mod and then remod you. Ara ara. O kawaii koto. 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 Kwa kwa kwa. Kwa kwa kwa. Kawaii kawaii Kaguya o kawaii koto. 10 hours. 10 hours of o kawaii koto. Hang on. Hang on. I am not drunk. O kawaii koto. Aroma. Aroma. O kawaii koto. O kawaii kyobu da na. O kawaii koto. O kawaii koto. Totemo yoku. O niai desu koto. Konsuminyon. O kawaii koto. Mataku. O kawaii koto. Mataku. That's the one I need to be using more often. One was Rick Astley. What? You guys, can we just sit here and watch and watch Korone together? That would make me happy. She's so cute. She's playing Mother from the original, from the Famicom. I love her so much. How's it going, Danny? How's it going, Recall? What greatness have you stumbled onto? I don't know. I don't have answers. I was gonna read. I was about to start reading, and then I stopped. And then there was some o kawaii koto, and then you take that backwater crypt. Korone isn't best girl. She's waifu. She's hollow waifu. The person who made that video redeemed all those points. Okay. 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 She's both. No, I have to be best girl, VTuber. Korone is waifu. I have to fit somewhere in there. Damn it. Otherwise you'd be over there watching Korone instead of me. Presently we descended towards the Sphinx and sat silent beneath the spell of those terrible unseeing eyes. On the vast stone breast we faintly discerned the emblem of Re-Haraket, for whose image the Sphinx was mistaken in a late dynasty. And though sand covered the tablet between the great paws, we recalled what Tutmosis IV inscribed thereon, and the dream he had when a prince. It was then that the smile of the Sphinx vaguely displeased us, and made us wonder about the legends of subterranean passages beneath the monstrous creature leading down down to depths none might dare hint at, depths connected with mysteries older than the dynastic Egypt we excavate, and having a sinister relation to the persistence of abnormal, animal-headed gods in the ancient Nilotic pantheon. Then, too, it was I asked myself an idle question whose hideous significance was not to appear for many an hour. Not getting banned. Defending my time. I mean, I've got goth mom. I don't need best girl. I think, having the title of mom means more in the long run. It's sort of like, there's a bit of respect there, in a way, you know? I say as I'm dusting my desk, chatting. How did I untime him out? There's forward slash untimeout username command. The Shadow Realm calls. Best English VTuber? I think there are a lot of people that are better English VTubers. You almost timed yourself out yesterday. If you've been timed out, I don't think you're unable to time yourself back in. Other tourists now began to overtake us. Amon, thank you for the host. Thank you. Other tourists now began to overtake us. How are you doing, Amon? I saw you mention earlier in the Discord that your players... Thank you, Water Crypt. Try doing unmod. Well, I'll be able to see that you were timed out. It pops up in chat when commands are used by me or the mods. Was it Amo? Oh no, it was Dagon that was talking earlier. Never mind. I'm a dork. Other tourists now began to overtake us, and we moved on to the sand-choked Temple of the Sphinx, 50 yards to the southeast, which I have previously mentioned as the Great Gate of the Causeway to the Second Pyramid's mortuary chapel on the plateau. Most of it was still underground, and although we dismounted and descended through a modern passageway to its alabaster corridor and pillared hall, I felt that Abdul and the local German attendant had not shown us all there was to see. After this, we made the conventional circuit of the pyramid plateau, examining the second pyramid and the peculiar ruins of its mortuary chapel to the east, the third pyramid and its miniature southern satellites and ruined eastern chapel, the rock tombs and the honeycombings of the 4th and 5th dynasties, and the famous Campbell's tomb, whose shadowy shaft sinks precipitously for 53 feet to a sinister sarcophagus, which one of our camel divers divested of the cumbering sand after a vertiginous descent by rope. God damn it, Lovecraft. We need more dark music. Hang on. This is like mystical and magical type music. Your cult is growing. How's it going, Jeffrey? Plin plin plon with the rain. There you go. We'll use some dark piano. Dark piano. Jumps in the abyss. What really makes that is the emote. Hey, man. Oh, man. Oh, it's Lucas King. I listen to his stuff all the time. Nice. Cries now assailed us from the Great Pyramids, where Bedouins were besieging a party of tourists with offers of guidance to the top, or of displays of speed in the performance of solitary trips up and down. 7 minutes is said to be the record for such an ascent and descent, but many lusty sheiks and sons of sheiks assured us they could cut it to 5 if given the requisite impetus of liberal bakshish. They did not get this impetus, though we did let Abdul take us up, thus obtaining a view of unprecedented magnificence, which included not only remote and glittering Cairo, with its crowned citadel and background of gold-violet hills, but all of the pyramids of the Memphian district as well, from Abu Raus on the north to Dashir on the south. The Saqqara Step Pyramid, which marks the evolution of the low mastaba into the true pyramid, showed clearly and alluringly in the sandy distance. It is close to this transition monument that the famed tomb of Perneb was found, more than 400 miles north of the Theban Rock Valley where Tutankhamun sleeps. Again, I was forced to silence through sheer awe. The prospect of such antiquity, and the secrets each hoary monument seemed to hold and brood over, filled me with a reverence and sense of immensity nothing else ever gave me. This is Under the Pyramids, one of Lovecraft's shorter works. It features Harry Houdini recounting his it's a fictional retelling of his adventure or sightseeing in Egypt. Thanks, I hate it. Your head is spinning. No, it's fine. You know how to find a way out of that place, Aelin. Fatigued by our climb, and disgusted with the importunate Bedouins whose actions seemed to defy every rule of taste, we omitted the arduous detail of entering the cramped interior passages of any of the pyramids, though we saw several of the hardiest tourists preparing for the suffocating crawl through Cheop's mightiest memorial. As we dismissed and overpaid our local bodyguard and drove back to Cairo with Abdul Reis under the afternoon sun, we half regretted the omission we had made. Such fascinating things were whispered about lower pyramid passages, not in the guidebooks. Passages whose entrances had been hastily blocked up and concealed by certain uncommunicative archaeologists who had found and begun to explore them. Of course, this whispering was largely baseless on the face of it, but it was curious to reflect how persistently visitors were forbidden to enter the pyramids at night, or to visit the lowest burrows and crypt of the Great Pyramid. Perhaps in the latter case, it was the psychological effect which was feared. The effect on the visitor of feeling himself huddled down beneath a gigantic world of solid masonry, joined to the life he has known by the merest tube in which he may only crawl, and which any accident or evil design might block. The whole subject seemed so weird and alluring that we resolved to pay the Pyramid Plateau another visit at the earliest possible opportunity. For me, this opportunity came much earlier than I expected. Yes, hydration liquid crypt. Somebody did say crypt. That evening, the members of our party, feeling somewhat tired after the strenuous program of the day, I went alone with Abdul Reis for a walk through the picturesque Arab quarter. Though I had seen it by day, I wished to study the alleys and bazaars in the dusk, when rich shadows and mellow gleams of light would add to their glamour and fantastic illusion. The native crowds were thinning, but were still very noisy and numerous when we came upon a knot of reveling Bedouins in the sunken Nashin, in the Sukanashin, or bazaar of the coppersmiths. Their apparent leader, an insolent youth with heavy features and saucily cocked tarbush. What the hell's a tarbush? Shit, how is it saucily cocked? Took some notice of us, and evidently recognized with no great friendliness my competent but admittedly supercilious and sneeringly disposed guide. Perhaps I thought he resented that odd reproduction of the Sphinx's half-smile which I had often remarked with amused irritation. Or perhaps he did not like the hollow and sepulchral resonance of Abdul's voice. At any rate, the exchange of ancestrally appropriate... Oh my god. It's like Lovecraft went through the dictionary and he picked out all of the words that have never been used. Like every single one of them. Set them down on his desk and began writing a story and inserted them everywhere that he could. Hydration liquid crypt. How's your day going? Scrubba, how you doing? Ancestrally opprobrious language became very brisk, and before long, Aliziz, as I heard the stranger called, when called by no worse name, began to pull violently at Abdul's robe, an action quickly reciprocated, and leading to a spirited scuffle in which both combatants lost their sacredly cherished headgear, and would have reached an even direr condition had I not intervened and separated them by main force. What are they angry about? The one guy's like, no, we can't take this dumb American down into that space, you idiot. And then Abdul's like, look, he's gonna pay us more money. He's one of the rich ones. The other guy's like, no amount of money is worth risking that. What if another one goes missing? Didactic? I think that was earlier in the script. Money or you live. Ew, an American. That's what Houdini was, right? He was he was American. At the beginning he was talking about how he was trying to avoid stuff because being American or something. I don't quite remember. was like a week ago. I don't remember. If anything, I know that he lived in America. My interference, at first seemingly unwelcome on both sides, succeeded at last in effecting a truce. Sullenly, each belligerent composed his wrath and his attire, and with an assumption of dignity as profound as it was sudden, the two formed a curious pact of honor, which I soon learned is a custom of great antiquity in Cairo, a pact for the settlement of their difference by means of a nocturnal fist fight atop the Great Pyramid, long after the departure of the last moonlight sightseer. I want. It's the best way to resolve disputes. Just go fight. Meet me at the top of the pyramid by twilight, you motherfucker. Go fisticuffs. 1-on-1. How's it going, Akira? 1v1 me, bro. Exactly. On top of the pyramid. After all the sightseers are in their hotels, tweeting on Instagram. Posting on Instagram about their visit to the pyramids. Oh gosh. Each duelist was to assemble a party of seconds, and the affair was to begin at midnight, proceeding by rounds in the most civilized possible fashion. In all this planning, there was much which excited my interest. The fight itself promised to be unique and spectacular, while the thought of the scene on that hoary pile overlooking the antediluvian plateau of Giza under the wan moon of the pallid small hours appealed to every fiber of imagination in me. You know what this is? The extra amount of, like, flourish, this is something that he wrote when he was a teenager. Because you don't write like this when you're... after you've been writing for several years. Like, I know that he died young. He was, like, in his 30s when he died. But this sentence right here, how it just drags on, that's telling. He was a teenager when he wrote this. How's it going, Jin? A request found Abdul exceedingly willing to admit me to his party of seconds, so that all the rest of the early evening I accompanied him to various dens in the most lawless regions of the town, most notably of the Izbikieh, where he gathered one by one a select and formidable band of congenial cutthroats as his pugilistic background. Shortly after 9, our party mounted on donkeys bearing such royal of tourist reminiscent names as Ramses, Mark Twain, J.P. Morgan, and Minnehaha, edged through street labyrinths, both oriental and occidental, crossed in the muddy and mast-forested Nile by the bridge of the Bronze Lions, and cantered philosophically between the lebbeks on the road to Giza. You know, there was a first draft of Alice in Wonderland by Lewis Carroll, and that first draft, every paragraph was a single sentence. There were no breaks. And that's what that just was. Why? Why can't we just have, like, some short sentences? Slightly over 2 hours were consumed by the trip, toward the end of which we passed the last of the returning tourists, saluted the last inbound trolley car, and were alone with the night and the past and the spectral moon. Then we saw the vast pyramids at the end of the avenue, ghoulish with dim atavistical menace which I had not seemed to notice in the daytime. Even the smallest of them held a hint of the ghastly. For was it not in this that they had buried Queen Nitocris alive in the 6th dynasty? Subtle Queen Nitocris, who once invited all her enemies to a feast in a temple below the Nile, and drowned them by opening the water gates? I recalled that the Arabs whispered things about Nitocris, and shunned the third pyramid at certain phases of the moon. It must have been over her that Thomas More was brooding when he wrote a thing muttered about by Memphian boatmen. The subterranean nymph that dwells mid sunless gems and glories hid, the lady of the pyramid. Story time. Yeah, Jen. Every Saturday I try to read some Lovecraft. Am I an avid reader? I would like to read more than I do. But yeah, my bookshelf is pretty much filled. Some of my favorite writers are Neil Gaiman, Cherry Priest, Jim Butcher, Chuck Palahniuk, and then I've got a bunch of manga also. There are a couple others, but they're like one-off books. I haven't read more than a single one or more from them. Early as we were, Ali Aziz and his party were ahead of us, for we saw their donkeys outlined against the desert plateau at Kafr al-Haram, toward which squalid Arab settlement close to the Sphinx. We had diverged instead of following the regular road to the Mena House. Some were of the sleepy, inefficient police, where some of the sleepy, inefficient police might have observed and halted us. Here, where filthy Bedouins stabled camels and donkeys in the rock tombs of Khephrans courtiers, we were led up the rocks and over the sand to the Great Pyramid, up whose time-worn sides the Arabs swarmed eagerly, Abdul Rees offering me the assistance I did not need. Big man Houdini, I don't need help. I get out of shackles as magic tricks. I could climb a pyramid. Never forget the manga collection. Well, I have that manga collection, my main one. And then I've got a shelf dedicated to only Yuri stuff. Citrus, Bloom Into You, Kobayashi's Dragon Maid, Still Sick. Solo Exchange Diary. All the good stuff. No, I haven't read the King in Yellow yet. Part of reading on stream is that it has to be in the public domain. So if it was from super early 1900s, I could probably read it. Or earlier. As most travelers know, the actual apex of this structure has long been worn away, leaving a reasonably flat platform 12 yards square. On this eerie pinnacle, a squared circle was formed. What I don't understand is how it's not transformative when somebody reads it. You know? I don't know. To me, it's a lot like music, where if you're doing your own version, your own performance, your own recitation of it, and adding your music, And being a goth anime girl, how is that not transforming the work a little bit? A squared circle was formed, and in a few moments, the sardonic desert moon leered down upon a battle which, but for the quality of ringside cries, might as well have occurred at some minor athletic club in America. Fight Club. As I watched it, I felt that some of our less desirable institutions were not lacking, for every blow feint and defense bespoke stalling to my not inexperienced eye. It was quickly over, and despite my misgivings as to the methods, I felt a sort of proprietary pride when Abdul Rees was adjudged the winner. Reconciliation was phenomenally rapid, and amidst the singing, fraternizing, and drinking which followed, I found it difficult to realize that a quarrel had ever occurred. Oddly enough, I myself seemed to be more of a center of notice than the antagonists, and from my smattering of Arabic, I judged that they were discussing my professional performances and escapes from every sort of manacle and confinement, in a manner which indicated not only a surprising knowledge of me, but a distinct hostility and skepticism concerning my feats of escape. It gradually dawned on me that the elder magic of Egypt did not depart without leaving traces, and that fragments of a strange secret lore and priestly cult practices have survived surreptitiously among the Fellahin to such an extent that the prowess of a strange Howie or magician is resented and disputed. Oh. Welcome to the Tingleverse. Who's Chuck Tingle? Great. It's too late. Gradually dawned on me a lot of resented dispute. I thought of how much my hollow-voiced guide Abdul Rees looked like an old Egyptian priest or pharaoh or smiling sphinx, and wondered. Suddenly something happened, which a flash proved the correctness of my reflections and made me curse the denseness whereby I had accepted the night's events as other than the empty and malicious frame-up they now showed themselves to be. Without warning, and doubtless in answer to some subtle sign from Abdul, the entire band of Bedouins precipitated itself upon me, and having produced heavy ropes, soon had me bound as securely as I was ever bound in the course of my life, either on the stage or off. I struggled at first, but soon saw that one man could make no headway against a band of over 20 sinewy barbarians. My hands were tied behind my back, my knees bent to their fullest extent, and my wrists and ankles stoutly linked together with unyielding cords. A stifling gag was forced into my mouth, and a blindfold fastened tightly over my eyes. Then, as the Arabs bore me aloft on their shoulders and began a jouncing descent of the pyramid, I heard the taunts of my late guide Abdul, who mocked and jeered delightedly in his hollow voice, and assured me that I was soon to have my magic powers put to a supreme test which would quickly remove any egotism I might have gained through triumphing over all of the tests offered by America and Europe. Egypt, he reminded me, is very old and full of inner mysteries and antique powers not even conceivable to the experts of today. whose devices had so uniformly failed to entrap me. How far or in what direction I was carried, I cannot tell, for the circumstances were all against the formation of any accurate judgment. I know, however, that it could not have been a great distance, since my bearers at no point hastened beyond a walk, yet kept me aloft a surprisingly short time. It is this perplexing brevity which makes me feel almost like shuddering when I think of Giza and its plateau. For one is oppressed by hints of the closeness to everyday tourist routes of what existed then and must still exist. The evil abnormality I speak of did not become manifest at first. Setting me down on a surface, which I recognized as sand rather than rock, my captors passed a rope around my chest and dragged me a few feet to a ragged opening in the ground, into which they presently lowered me with much rough handling. For apparent eons, I bumped against the stony irregular sides of a narrow-hewn well, which I took to be one of the numerous burial shafts of the plateau until the prodigious, almost incredible depth of it robbed me of all basis of conjecture. The horror of the experience deepened with every dragging second. That any descent through the sheer solid rock could be so vast without reaching the core of the planet itself, or that any rope made by man could be so long as to dangle me in these unholy and unseemingly fathomless profundities of nether earth, were beliefs of such grotesqueness that it was easier to doubt my agitated senses than to accept them. Even now I am uncertain, for I know how deceitful the senses of time becomes when one or more of the usual perceptions or conditions of life is removed or distorted. But I am quite sure that I preserved a logical consciousness that far, that at least I did not add any full-grown phantoms of imagination to a picture hideous enough in its reality and explicable by a type of cerebral illusion vastly short of actual hallucination. All this was not the cause of my first bit of fainting. The shocking ordeal was cumulative, and the beginning of the later terrors was a very perceptible increase in my rate of descent. They were paying out that infinitely long rope very swiftly now, and I scraped cruelly against the rough and constricted sides of the shaft as I shot madly downward. My clothing was in tatters, and I felt a trickle of blood all over, even above the morning and excruciating pain. My nostrils, too, were assailed by a scarcely definable menace, a creeping odor of damp staleness, curiously unlike anything I had ever smelt before, and having faint overtones of spice and incense that lent an element of mockery. Then the mental cataclysm came. It was horrible, hideous beyond all articulate description, because it was all of the soul, with nothing of detail to describe. It was the ecstasy of nightmare and the summation of the fiendish. The suddenness of it was apocalyptic and demonic. One moment I was plunging agonizingly downward, down that narrow well of million-toothed torture, yet the next moment I was soaring on bat wings in the gulfs of hell, swinging free and swooping through illimitable miles of boundless, musty space, rising dizzily to measureless pinnacles of chilling aether, then diving, gasping, to sucking nadirs of ravenous, nauseous, lower vacua. Thank God for the mercy that shut out in oblivion those clawing furies of consciousness, which half unhinged my faculties and tore harpy-like at my spirit. That one respite, short as it was, gave me the strength, the sanity to endure those still greater sublimations of cosmic panic that lurked and gibbered on the road ahead. Part 2. It was very gradually that I regained my senses after that eldritch flight through Stygian space. The process was infinitely painful and colored by fantastic dreams in which my bound and gagged condition found singular embodiment. The precise nature of these dreams was very clear while I was experiencing them, but became blurred in my recollection almost immediately afterward, and was soon reduced to the merest outline by the terrible events, real or imaginary, which followed. I dreamed that I was in the grasp of a great and horrible paw, a yellow, hairy, five-clawed paw, which had reached out of the earth to crush and engulf me. And when I stopped to reflect what the paw was, it seemed to me that it was Egypt. In the dream, I looked back at the events of the preceding weeks and saw myself lured and enmeshed little by little, subtly and insidiously, by some hellish ghoul spirit of the elder Nile sorcery, some spirit that was in Egypt before ever man was, and that will be when man is no more. I saw the horror and unwholesome antiquity of Egypt, and the grisly alliance it had always had with tombs and temples of the dead. I saw phantom processions of priests with the heads of bulls, falcons, cats, and ibises. Phantom processions marching interminably through subterraneous labyrinths and avenues of titanic propylae, beside which a man is a fly, and offering unnameable sacrifices to indescribable gods. Stone colossi marched in endless night and drove herds of grinning androsphinxes down to the shores of illimitable stagnant rivers of pitch, and beyond it all I saw the ineffable malignity of primordial necromancy, black and amorphous, and fumbling greedily after me in the darkness to choke out the spirit that had dared to mock it by emulation. In my sleeping brain there took shape a melodrama of sinister hatred and pursuit, and I saw the black soul of Egypt singling me out and calling me in inaudible whispers, calling and luring me, leading me on with the glitter and glamour of a Saracenic surface, but ever pulling me down to the age-mad catacombs and horrors of its dead and abysmal pharaonic heart. Then the dream faces took on human resemblances, and I saw my guide, Abdul Rees, in the robes of a king, with a sneer of the Sphinx on his features. And I knew that those features were the features of Khephren the Great, who raised the second pyramid, carved over the Sphinx's face in the likeness of his own, and built that titanic gateway temple whose myriad corridors the archaeologists think they had dug out of the cryptical sand in the uninformative rock. And I looked at the long, lean, rigid hand of Khephren, the long, lean, rigid hand, as I had seen it on the Diorite statue in the Cairo Museum, the statue they had found in the terrible Gateway Temple, and wondered that I had not shrieked when I saw it on Abdul Rees. That hand! It was hideously cold, and it was crushing me. It was the cold and cramping of the sarcophagus, the chill and constriction of unrememberable Egypt. It was knighted, necropolitan Egypt itself, that yellow paw. And they whisper such things of Khephren. But at this juncture I began to awake, or at least to assume a condition less completely that of sleep than the one just preceding. I recalled the flight atop the pyramid, the treacherous Bedouins and their attack, my frightful descent by rope through endless rock depths, and my mad swinging and plunging in a chill void redolent of aromatic putrescence. I perceived that I now lay on a damp rock floor, and that my bonds were still biting into me with unloosened force. It was very cold, and I seemed to detect a faint current of noisome air sweeping across me. The cuts and bruises I had received from the jagged sides of the rock shaft were paining me woefully, their soreness enhanced to a stinging or burning acuteness by some pungent quality in the faint draught, and the mere act of rolling over was enough to set my whole frame throbbing with untold agony. As I turned, I felt a tug from above, and concluded that the rope whereby I was lowered still reached the surface. Whether or not the Arabs still held it, I had no idea, nor had I any idea of how far within the earth I was. I knew that the darkness around me was wholly, or nearly total, since no ray of moonlight penetrated my blindfold, but I did not trust my senses enough to accept as evidence of extreme depth the sensation of vast duration which had characterized my descent. Knowing at least that I was in a space of considerable extent reached from the surface directly above by an opening in the rock, I doubtfully conjectured that my prison was perhaps the buried gateway chapel of old Khephren, the Temple of the Sphinx. Perhaps some inner corridor which the guides had not shown me during my morning visit, and from which I might easily escape if I could find my way to the barred entrance. It would be a labyrinth wandering, but no worse than others out of which I had in the past found my way. The first step was to get free of my bonds, gag and blindfold. And this, I knew, would be no great task, since subtler experts than these Arabs had tried every known species of fetter upon me during my long and varied career as an exponent of escape, yet had never succeeded in defeating my methods. Then it occurred to me that the Arabs might be ready to meet and attack me at the entrance upon any evidence of my probable escape from the binding cords, as would be furnished by any decided agitation of the rope which they probably held. This, of course, was taking for granted that my place of confinement was indeed Khepren's Temple of the Sphinx. The direct opening in the roof, wherever it might lurk, could not be beyond easy reach of the ordinary modern entrance near the Sphinx, if, in truth, it were any great distance at all on the surface, since the total area known to visitors is not all enormous. I had not noticed any such opening during my daytime pilgrimage, but knew that these things are easily overlooked amidst the drifting sands. Thinking these matters over as I lay bent and bound on the rock floor, I nearly forgot the horrors of the abysmal descent and cavernous swinging which had so lately reduced me to a coma. My present thought was only to outwit the Arabs, and I accordingly determined to work myself free as quickly as possible, avoiding any tug on the descending line which might betray an effective or even problematical attempt at freedom. This, however, was more easily determined than effected. A few preliminary trials made it clear that the little could be accomplished without considerable motion, and it did not surprise me when, after one especially energetic struggle, I began to feel the coils of falling rope as they piled up behind me and upon me. Obviously, I thought, the Bedouins had felt my movements and released their end of the rope, hastening no doubt to the temple's true entrance to lie murderously in wait for me. The prospect was not pleasing, but I had faced worse in my time without flinching, and would not flinch now. At present, I must first of all flee myself of my bonds, then trust to ingenuity to escape from the temple unharmed. It is curious how implicitly I had come to believe myself in old Temple of Khephren beside the Sphinx, and only a short distance below the ground. Welcome back with coffee. That belief was shattered, and every pristine apprehension of preternatural depth and demonic mystery revived by a circumstance which grew in horror and significance even as I formulated my philosophical plan. I have said that the falling rope was piling up around me, about and upon me. Now, I saw that it was continuing to pile, as no rope of normal length could possibly do. It gained in momentum and became an avalanche of hemp, accumulating mountainously on the floor and half burying me beneath its swift multiplying coils. Soon I was completely engulfed and gasping for breath as the increasing convolutions submerged and stifled me. My senses tottered again, and I vainly tried to fight off a menace despite desperate and ineluctable. It was not merely that I was tortured beyond human endurance, not merely that life and breath seemed to be crushed slowly out of me. It was the knowledge of what those unnatural lengths of rope implied, and the consciousness of what unknown and incalculable gulfs of inner earth must at this moment be surrounding me. My endless descent and swinging flight through goblin space then must have been real, and even now I must be lying helpless in some nameless cavern world toward the core of the planet. Such sudden confirmation of ultimate horror was insupportable, and a second time I lapsed into merciful oblivion. But of course, when I say oblivion, I do not imply that I was free from my dreams. On the contrary, my absence of from the conscious world was marked by visions of the most unutterable hideousness. God, if only I had not read so much Egyptology before coming to this land, which is the fountain of all darkness and terror. The second spell of fainting filled my sleeping mind anew with shivering realization of the country and its archaic secrets, and through some damnable chance my dreams turned to the ancient notions of the dead and their sojourns in soul and body beyond those mysterious tombs which were more houses than graves. I recalled in dream shapes, which it is well that I do not remember, the particular and elaborate construction of Egyptian sepulchres, and the exceedingly singular and terrific doctrines which determined this construction. All these people thought of was death and the dead. They conceived of a literal resurrection of the body which made them mummify it with desperate care and preserve all the vital organs in canopic jars near the corpse, whilst beside the body they believed in two other elements, the soul, which, after its weighing and approval by Osiris, dwelt in the land of the blessed, and the obscure and portentous Ka, or life principle, which wandered about the upper and lower worlds in a horrible way, demanding occasional access to the preserved body, consuming the food offerings brought by priests and pious relatives to the mortuary chapel, and sometimes, as men whispered, taking its body, or the wooden double always buried beside it, and stalking noxiously abroad on errands, peculiarly repellent. For thousands of years, those bodies rested gorgeously, encased and staring glassily upward when not visited by the Ka, awaiting the day when Osiris should restore both Ka and soul, and lead forth the stiff legions of the dead from the sunken houses of sleep. It was to have been a glorious rebirth, but not all souls were approved, nor were all tombs inviolate, so that certain grotesque mistakes and fiendish abnormalities were to be looked for. Even today, the Arabs murmur of unsanctified convocations and unwholesome worship in forgotten nether abysses, which only winged invisible Kas and soulless mummies may visit and return unscathed. Perhaps the most leeringly blood-congealed legends are those which relate to certain perverse products of decadent priestcraft, composite mummies made by the artificial union of human trunks and limbs with the heads of animals in imitation of the elder gods. At all stages of history, the sacred animals were mummified, so that consecrated bulls, cats, ibises, crocodiles, and the like might return someday to greater glory. But only mummified a crocodile. But when I was in elementary school, we mummified a chicken, like a store-bought chicken from like during Thanksgiving or something. We spent like the entire year working on it. It was disgusting. Cost a lot of salt. Used a lot of salt. Ugh. At all stages, right, blah, blah, blah. But only in the decadence did they mix the human and animal in the same mummy. Only in the decadence, when they did not understand the rights and prerogatives of the ka and the soul. What happened to those composite mummies is not told of, at least publicly, and it is certain that no Egyptologist ever found one. The whispers of Arabs are very wild and cannot be relied upon. They even hint that old Khephren, he of the Sphinx, the second pyramid, and the yawning gateway temple, lives far underground, wedded to the ghoul queen Nitokiris. Nitokiris. And ruling over the mummies that are neither of man or beast. I was gonna say crocodile? No. Just majority. Can't keep putting monsters to scare people. Yeah. Ravelord Nitocris. You right. That KFC man. The chick that KFC man or something like Oh man, we did have a name for it, but I don't remember what it was. It was some really fun play on Egypt and chickenhood. It's because you angered them. It's a chance of a lifetime. No, I mean we could mummify a turkey or something. It was all of these, of Khephren and his consort and his strange armies of the hybrid dead that I dreamed, and that is why I am glad that exact dream shapes have faded from my memory. My most horrible vision was connected with an idle question I had asked myself the day before when looking at the great cavern riddled of the desert and wondering with what unknown depths the temple so close to it might be secretly connected. That question, so innocent and whimsical then, assumed in my dream a meaning of frantic and hysterical madness. What huge and loathsome abnormality was the Sphinx originally carven to represent? My second awakening, if awakening it was, is a memory of stark hideousness which nothing else in my life, save one thing which came after, can parallel. And that life has been full of adventures beyond most men's. Remember that I had lost consciousness whilst buried beneath a cascade of falling rope, whose immensity revealed the cataclysmic depth of my present position. Now, a perception returned. I felt the entire weight gone, and realized upon rolling over that although I was still tied, gagged, and blindfolded, some agency had removed completely the suffocating hempen landslide which had overwhelmed me. The significance of this condition, of course, came to me only gradually, but even so, I think it would have brought unconsciousness again had I not by this time reached such a state of emotional exhaustion that no new horror could make much difference. I was alone. With what? And before I could torture myself with any new reflection or make any fresh effort to escape from my bonds, an additional circumstance became manifest. Pains not formerly felt were racking my arms and legs, and I seemed coated with a profusion of dried blood beyond anything my former cuts and abrasions could furnish. My chest, too, seemed pierced by 100 wounds, as though some malign titanic ibis had been pecking at it. Oh, it's a bird. Oh, I know what bird that is. Ibis? Assuredly, the agency which had removed the rope was a hostile one, and had begun to wreak terrible injuries upon me when somehow impelled to desist. Yet at the time, my sensations were distinctly the reverse of what one might expect. Instead of sinking into a bottomless pit of despair, I was stirred to a new courage and action, for now I felt that the evil forces were physical things with which a fearless man might encounter on an even basis. On the strength of this, I tugged against my bonds and used all the art of a lifetime to free myself, as I had so often done amidst the glare of the lights of the applause of vast crowds. The familiar details of my escaping process commenced to engross me, and now that the long rope was gone, I half regained my belief that the supreme horrors were hallucinations after all, and that there had never been any terrible shaft, measureless abyss, or interminable rope. Was I, after all, in the gateway temple of Kefren beside the Sphinx, and had the sneaking Arab stolen in to torture me as I lay helpless there? At any rate, I must be free. Let me stand up unbound, ungagged, and with eyes open to catch any glimmer of light which might come trickling from any source, and I could actually delight in the combat against evil and treacherous foes. How long I took in shaking off my encumbrances I cannot tell. It must have been longer than in my exhibition performances, because I was wounded, exhausted, and enervated by the experiences I had passed through. When I was finally free and taking deep breaths of a chill, damp, evilly spiced air, all the more horrible when encountered without the screen of a gag and blindfold edges, I found that I was too cramped and fatigued to move at once. There I lay, trying to stretch a frame bent and mangled for an indefinite period, and straining my eyes to catch a glimpse of some ray of light which would give me a hint as to my position. I have to go to the restroom. I apologize. Welcome back. I must use the restroom. I'll be right back. Don't go nowhere. You're all wonderful. This is one of my favorites. Oh gosh. The build up, the atmosphere, the mood, the location, the circumstances. It's so good. How's everybody doing? Enjoying the spooks? Don't worry. It's so hot outside. I just said the same thing. Really constructs a dark ambience. Yeah, a lot of fairy tales aren't actually like whimsical and happy like we have them today. They're all like really dark and grim. The original versions of Grimm's fairy tales are amazing. All right. By degrees, my strength I think it's frustrating. No, don't worry. Don't. It's not a big question. I just think it's frustrating. He's a product of his time. Yeah. It's not. That's not to say it's an excuse for the things that he wrote and said about various races. Because I don't know. I think if he weren't so terrified of everything and weren't such a uptight prick, you know, he could have written a lot better stuff. I can only imagine like him working together and learning about different cultures and stuff and just taking what we already know and love about Lovecraft and having it be that much better because of the collaboration. Many problems, yeah. Exactly, Amon. Like T.S. Eliot. Yeah, June, the cat was named something really, really awful. Reading for 2 hours. It hasn't been 2 hours. It was like an hour ago when I started. The first like 40 minutes was me trying to avoid reading because I was afraid that I was going to get all screwed up with all the Egyptian words and everything. I think if you know what you're doing as a writer, you can include clashes of race in a tasteful way. I think that's grateful that his eldritch horror is being explored by, yeah. And that's what I'm saying, like the works that use Lovecraft as a foundation today are just that much better. Oh yeah, I just finished that paragraph. By degrees, my strength and flexibility returned, but my eyes beheld nothing. As I staggered to my feet, I peered diligently in every direction, yet met only an ebony blackness as great as that I had known when blindfolded. I tried my legs, blood encrusted beneath my shredded trousers, and found that I could walk, yet could not decide in what direction to go. Obviously, I ought not to walk at random and perhaps retreat directly from the entrance I sought. So I paused to note the direction of the cold, fetid, nature-scented air current which I had never ceased to feel. Accepting the point of its source and the possible entrance to the abyss, I strove to keep track of this landmark and to walk consistently toward it. I had a matchbox with me, and even a small electric flashlight, but of course the pickpockets of my tossed and tattered clothing were long since emptied of all heavy articles. As I walked cautiously in the blackness, the draught grew stronger and more offensive, till at length I could regard it as nothing less than a tangible stream of detestable vapor pouring out from some aperture like the smoke of the genie from the fisherman's jar in the Eastern tale. The East. Egypt. Truly, this dark cradle of civilization was ever the wellspring of horrors and marvels unspeakable. The more I reflected on the nature of the cavern wind, the greater my sense of disquiet became. For although, despite its odor, I had sought its source as at least an indirect clue to the outer world, I now saw plainly that this foul emanation could have no admixture or connection whatsoever with the clean air of the Libyan desert, but must be essentially a thing vomited from sinister gulfs still lower down. I had, then, been walking in the wrong direction. After a moment's reflection, I decided not to retrace my steps. Away from the draught, I would have no landmarks, for the rough, level rock floor was devoid of distinctive configurations. If, however, I followed up the strange current, I would undoubtedly arrive at an aperture of some sort, from whose gate I could perhaps work round the walls to the opposite side of this cyclopean and otherwise innavigable hall. That I might fail, I well realized. I saw that this was no part of Khephren gateway temple which tourists know, and it struck me that this particular hall might be unknown even to archaeologists, and merely stumbled upon by the inquisitive and malignant Arabs who had imprisoned me. If so, was there any present gate of escape to the known parts or to the outer air? What evidence, indeed, did I now possess that this was the gateway temple at all? For a moment, all my wildest speculations rushed back upon me, and I thought of that valid meline of impressions: descent, suspension in space, the rope, my wounds, and the dreams that were frankly dreams. Was this the end of life for me? Or indeed, would it be merciful if this moment were the end? I could answer none of my own questions, but merely kept on till fate, or for a third time, reduced me to oblivion. This time there were no dreams, for the suddenness in the incident shocked me out of all thought, either conscious or subconscious. Tripping on an unexpected descending step at a point where the offensive draught became strong enough to offer an actual physical resistance, I was precipitated headlong down a black flight of huge stone stairs and into a gulf of hideousness unrelived. That I ever breathed again is a tribute to the inherent vitality of the healthy human organism. Rita's entree. That I ever breathed again is a tribute to the inherent vitality of the healthy human organism. Often I look back to that night and feel a touch of actual humor in these repeated lapses of consciousness, lapses whose succession reminds me at the time of nothing more than crude cinema melodramas of that period. Of course, it is possible that the repeated lapses never occurred and that all the features of that underground nightmare were merely the dreams of one long coma, which began with the shock of my descent into that abyss and ended with the healing balm of the outer air and of the rising sun, which found me stretched on the sands of Giza before the sardonic and dawn-flushed face of the Great Sphinx. I prefer to believe this latter explanation as much as I can, hence was glad when the police told me that the barrier to Khephren Gateway Temple had been found unfastened, and that the sizable rift to the surface did actually exist in one corner of the still buried part. I was glad, too, when my doctors pronounced my wounds only those to be expected from my seizure, blindfolding, lowering, struggling with bonds, falling some distance, perhaps into a depression in the temple's inner gallery, dragging myself to an outer barrier and escaping from it, and experiences like that. A very soothing diagnosis. And yet, I know that there must be more than appears on the surface. That extreme descent is too vivid a memory to be dismissed, and it is odd that no one has ever been able to find a man answering that description of my guide, Abdul Reis El Drogman, the tomb-throated guide who looked and smiled like King Khephren. Am I doing an exotic reading? No. I was just doing those 2 paragraphs for the character voice redeem. I have digressed from my connected narrative, perhaps in the vain hope of evading the telling of that final incident. That incident, which of all is most certainly a hallucination, but I promise to relate it and do not break my promises. When I recovered, or seemed to recover, my senses after that fall down the black stone stairs, I was quite as alone and in darkness as before. The windy stench, bad enough before, was now fiendish. Yet I had acquired enough familiarity by this time to bear it stoically. Dazedly, I began to crawl away from the place whence the putrid wind came, and with my bleeding hands felt the colossal blocks of a mighty pavement. Once my head struck against a hard object and went, oh God, just thinking of that makes my head hurt. Oh shit. And when I felt of it, I learned that it was the base of a column of unbelievable immensity, whose surface was covered with gigantic chiseled hieroglyphs, very perceptible to my touch. Crawling on, I encountered other Titan columns at incomprehensible distances apart, when suddenly my attention was captured by the realization of something which must have been impinging on my subconscious, hearing long before the conscious sense was aware of it. From some still lower chasm in Earth's bowels were proceeding certain sounds, measured and definite, and like nothing. And like nothing I had ever heard before. That they were very ancient and distinctly ceremonial. I felt, almost intuitively, and much reading in Egyptology led me to associate them with the flute, the sambuke, the sistrum, and the tympanum. In their rhythmic piping, droning, rattling, and beating, I felt an element of terror beyond all the known terrors of Earth, a terror particularly dissociated from personal fear. and taking the form of sort of objective pity for our planet, that it should hold within its depths such horrors as must lie beyond these Egypanic cacophonies. The sounds increased in volume, and I felt that they were approaching. Then, and may all the gods of all the pantheons unite to keep the like from my ears again, I began to hear, faintly and far off, the morbid and millennial tramping of the marching things. It was hideous that footfalls so dissimilar should move in such perfect rhythm. The training of unhallowed thousands of years must lie behind that march of Earth's innermost monstrosities. Padding, clicking, walking, stalking, rumbling, lumbering, crawling, and all to the abhorrent discords of those mocking instruments. And then, thanks for following, Proto-Human. Oodaloo, thanks for resubbing. Hope you're having a good time, Oodaloo. And then, God, keep the memory of those Arab legends out of my head. The mummies without souls, the meeting place of the wandering cause, the hordes of the devil-cursed pharaonic dead of 40 centuries, the composite mummies led through the uttermost onyx voids by King Kefren and his ghoul-queen, Nitocris. The tramping drew nearer. Heaven save me from the sound of those feet, paws and hooves and pads and talons as it commenced to acquire detail. Down limitless reaches of sunless pavement, a spark of light flickered in the malodorous wind, and I drew behind the enormous circumference of a cyclopic column that I might escape for a while the horror that was stalking million-footed toward me through gigantic hypostyles of inhuman dread and phobic antiquity. The flickers increased, and the tramping and dissonant rhythm grew sickeningly loud. In the quivering orange light there stood faintly forth a scene of such stony awe that I gasped from sheer wonder that conquered even fear and repulsion. Bases of columns whose middles were higher than human sight. Mere bases of things that must each dwarf the Eiffel Tower to insignificance. Hieroglyphics carved by unthinkable hands in caverns where daylight can only be a remote legend. I would not look at the marching things. That I desperately resolved as I heard their creaking joints and nitrous wheezing above the dead music and that dead tramping. It was merciful that they did not speak. But God, their crazy torches began to cast shadows on the surface of those stupendous columns. Heaven take it away! Hippopotami should not have human hands and carry torches. Men should not have the heads of crocodiles. I tried to turn away, but the shadows and the sounds and the stench were everywhere. Then I remembered something I used to do in half-conscious nightmares as a boy and began to repeat to myself, "This is a dream, this is a dream," but it was of no use, and I could only shut my eyes and pray. At least, that is what I think I did, for one is never sure in visions, and I know this can have been nothing more. I wondered whether I should ever reach the world again, and at times would furtively open my eyes to see if I could discern any features of the place other than the wind of spiced putrefaction and the topless columns and the thaumatropically grotesque shadows of abnormal horror. The sputtering glare of multiplying torches now shone, and unless this hellish place were wholly without walls, I could not fail to see some boundary or fixed landmark soon. But I had to shut my eyes again when I realized how many of the things were assembling, and when I glimpsed a certain object walking solemnly and steadily without any body above the waist. A fiendish and undulant corpse gurgle or death rattle now split the very atmosphere. The charnel atmosphere, poisonous with naphtha and bitumen blasts, in one concerted chorus from the ghoulish legion of hybrid blasphemies. My eyes, perversely shaken open, gazed for an instant upon a sight which no human creature could even imagine without panic and fear and physical exhaustion. The things had filed ceremonially in one direction, the direction of the noisome wind. Where the light of their torches showed their bended heads, or the blended heads of such as had heads. They were worshipping before a great black fetor-belching aperture, which reached up almost out of sight, and which I could see was flanked at right angles by two giant staircases whose ends were far away in shadow. One of these was undoubtedly the staircase I had fallen down. The dimensions of the whole were fully in proportion with those of the columns. An ordinary house would have been lost in it, and any average public building could easily have been moved in and out. It was so vast a surface that only by moving the eye could one trace its boundaries. So vast, so hideously black, and so aromatically stinking. Directly in front of this yawning, polyphemus door, the things were throwing objects, evidently sacrifices or religious offerings, to judge by their gestures. Kefren was their leader, sneering King Kefren, or the guide Abdul Rees, crowned with the golden scent and intoning endless formulae with the hollow voice of the dead. By his side knelt beautiful Queen Nidakris, whom I saw in profile for a moment, noting that the right half of her face was eaten away by rats or other ghouls, and I shut my eyes again when I saw what objects were being thrown as offerings to the fetid aperture or its possible local deity. It occurred to me that, judging from elaborateness of this worship, the concealed deity must be one of considerable importance. Was it Osiris, or Isis, Horus, or Anubis, or some vast, unknown god of the dead, still more central and supreme? There is a legend that terrible altars and colossi were reared to an unknown one before ever the known gods were worshipped. And now, as I steeled myself to watch the rapt and sepulchral adorations of those nameless things, and thought of every flash upon me, the hall was dim and the columns heavy with shadow, with every creature of that nightmare throng absorbed in shocking raptures. It might be barely possible for me to creep past to the faraway end of one of the staircases and ascend unseen, trusting to fate and skill to deliver me from the upper reaches. Where I was, I neither knew nor seriously reflected upon, and for a moment it struck me as amusing to plan a serious escape from which I knew to be a dream. Was I in some hidden and unsuspected lower realm of Kefren's gateway temple, that temple which generations have persistently called the Temple of the Sphinx? I could not conjecture, but I resolved to ascend to life and consciousness if wit and muscle could carry me. Wriggling flat on my stomach, I began the anxious journey towards the foot of the left-hand staircase, which seemed the more accessible of the two. I cannot describe the incidents and sensations of that crawl, but they may be guessed when one reflects on what I had to watch steadily in that malign, wind-blown torchlight in order to avoid detection. The bottom of the staircase was, as I have said, far away in shadow, as it had to be to rise without a bend to the dizzy parapeted landing above the Titanic aperture. This placed the last stages of my crawl at some distance from the noisome herd, though the spectacle chilled me, even when quite remote at my right. At length, I succeeded in reaching the steps and began to climb, keeping close to the wall, on which I observed decorations of the most hideous sort, and relying for safety on the absorbed, ecstatic interest with which the monstrosities watched the foul-breezed aperture and the impious objects of nourishment they had flung on the pavement before it. Though the staircase was huge and steep, fashioned of vast porphyry blocks, as if for the feet of a giant, the ascent seemed virtually interminable. Dread of discovery and the pain which renewed exercise had brought to my wounds combined to make that upward crawl a thing of agonizing memory. I had intended on reaching the landing to climb immediately onward along whatever upper staircase might mount from there, stopping for no last look at the carrion abominations that pawed and genuflected some 70 or 80 feet below. Yet, a sudden repetition of that thunderous corpse gurgle and death rattle chorus, coming as I had nearly gained the top of the flight and showing by its ceremonial rhythm that it was not an alarm of my discovery, caused me to pause and to peer cautiously over the parapet. How you doing, Nightblight? Sounds like Sobek. Actually, you might be right. No. The monstrosities were hailing something which had poked itself out from the nauseous aperture to seize the hellish fare proffered it. It was something quite ponderous, even as seen from my height, something yellowish and hairy, and endowed with a sort of nervous motion. It was as large, perhaps, as a good-sized hippopotamus, but very curiously shaped. It seemed to have no neck, but 5 separate shaggy heads springing in a row from a roughly cylindrical trunk. The first very small, the second good size, the third and fourth equal and largest of all, and the fifth rather small, though not so small as the first. Out of these heads darted curious rigid tentacles which seized ravenously on the excessively great quantities of unmentionable food placed before the aperture. Once in a while, the thing would leap up, and occasionally it would retreat into its den in a very odd manner. Its locomotion was so inexplicable that I stared in fascination, wishing it would emerge further from the cavernous lair beneath me. And then it did emerge. It did emerge, and at the sight I turned and fled up to the darkness, up the high staircase that rose behind me, fled unknowingly up incredible steps and ladders and inclined planes to which no human sight or logic guided me, and which I must ever relegate to the world of dreams for want of any confirmation. It must have been a dream, or the dawn would never have found me breathing on the sands of Giza before the sardonic dawn-flushed face of the Great Sphinx. The Great Sphinx! God, that idle question I asked myself on that sun-blessed morning before. What huge and loathsome abnormality was the Sphinx originally carven to represent? Accursed is the sight, be it the dream or not, that revealed to me the supreme horror, the unknown god of the dead, which licks its colossal chops in the unsuspected abyss, fed hideous morsels by soulless absurdities that should not exist, the five-headed monster that emerged. The five-headed monster, as large as a hippopotamus, the five-headed monster, and that of which it is the merest forepaw. But I survived, and I know it was only a dream. Man, it's one of the good ones. Like the narration? Thanks, Knight's Plate. Man, that was great. That felt good. That felt really good. I've been working so much on the new season of Elegant Sea Urchin that I haven't finished more than the first episode, so I haven't been able to record anything or really dig into. I've seen some shit. Yeah, you're right. Haven't been able to really dig in and just horror out in voice acting recently. Man. Okay. Swoon was traumatized again. Everything again in Daffy Duck's voice. I can't do Daffy Duck's voice. This looks like a good place to find some ingredients. That's about as close as I can't get the thing that you need for Daffy Duck's voice. This looks... you know. Okay. I'm gonna go get food. This went on a little bit longer than I expected it to. I'm gonna take 30 minutes. In the meantime, I'm gonna send everybody over to... I wish the raid button stayed up to date on which channels were live. Gosh dang it. Yeah, I figured he was live. Okay. Actually, no, I'm gonna send you over to Haley because I'm gonna be playing Fall Guys when I get back. She's adorable. Everybody, thank you so much. I'll be back shortly. As always, stay safe, wash your hands, and sweet dreams. Go say hi to Haley. Let me get one of these. How do we want to... what are we gonna say? She's kind of bigger. We need to have a raid message. Here we go. I think this will work. And then one last budash. There you go. Okay, copy that. Get over there. Consume the cute doggo VTuber. Everybody, thank you again. I'll see you shortly.